Okay, so we just got rained out for about half an hour, but one of the things that you have to learn when you're going to be a good painter is that even if you get a bit of rain, you got to stick it out and find ways to be productive. If every time it starts to rain we go home and call it a day, we're not going to get as much painted this summer as we want to, and we're not going to earn as many piecework hours. So a typical rule of thumb is to find somewhere, marked off under rain shelter that you can find somewhere to do some painting work, even if it is getting a little bit wet, just like these guys have found somewhere to paint under shelter. Now what we're going to do is focus on painting a windowsill. We're going to talk about cutting work, brushing work. I'm going to teach you guys how to use your brush. So first it starts by pouring some paint in the can. Okay. So we're going to poke the holes in the can there. Great. Pour a bit into our cut can. Excellent. And why do we use a cut can again? That's right, so that we don't walk around with a full can of paint spilling paint everywhere. Okay. Now typically you want to be doing this over your base camp, but we've moved our base camp temporarily because it is wet and rainy out still. Although it's getting a bit sunnier, so. But normally you don't want to be bringing cans all over the site. You really want to be keeping it in the base camp area. So I'll start by showing you how to paint with a 2.5 inch brush here. And then I'll move on to one of the more difficult brushes. You want to hold your can by having a thumb underneath it, and then like that, so that now you have full control. You're not holding like this where it's swinging around everywhere, paint spilling. Your can is an extension of your hand. Very good, very fluid, all one. So we do what's called a bang and load, right? Because if we go like this and then wipe all the paint off our brush, well, it's not dripping, but now when I go in to paint something, well, I don't really have much paint on my brush, so I want to do the bang and load. Now I have lots of paint on my brush. So am I going to go right into the cut line and make a mess? Well, no, because if I go right into the cut line, I have so much paint on my brush it's going to drip all over the edge that I'm trying to protect. So right now there's a lovely white painted windowsill here, or window base, and I'm going to try to paint the sill black, and I have to make a really nice cut line in this corner here. So what I'm going to do is get as much paint on my brush as possible. The first thing I'm going to do is wipe my paint off. Okay, now I have very little paint on my brush, and I feel more comfortable going in to make that straight cut line. Notice how we don't actually cut like that. A lot of people will think that if I'm trying to make a straight line here, I'm going to go like that to make the straight line. That's actually how you fan out and fill in your edges. What I'm going to start by doing is actually, if I want to make a straight line there, you hold your brush like this. What you see is that it's these bristles right here, the first maybe centimeter of the brush, that actually make the straight line, and the back bristles here hold all the paint. So when you're making your first straight lines, you're going to start with it not fully flat, but a bit angled. And you notice only the front couple bristles are actually making the straight line. The back bristles are holding all the paint. That's allowing me to stay straight. And as you get better, you get a bit faster, and maybe all the bristles can do it. But at the first, start like that. Only the front bristles are making the straight part of the line. Now I have all this paint here that I left when I took my paint off my brush, so of course I have to fan that out. See some streaks, some goops here. Want to make sure to get all of those, get into the corners. You want to brush your paint like that, or use your brush like to get into the corners and cracks like that. But if I leave it like that, it's not nice, so I got to fan it all out. Beautiful. Now, is there anything else you'll notice about this windowsill before I got started? Well, it was lovely prepped. It had already been scraped, sanded, primed. We used a gray-based primer here instead of a white primer so that the black will cover 2 coats much better. If I use a white primer, it's going to take a bit more paint and a bit more paint coats, maybe even a 3rd coat to cover it properly. Okay, so now we're painting, having a good time. It's a lot of fun. Okay, why don't I switch to a 3-inch brush and show you what that looks like. So now we have our 3-inch brush. You can see it's a lot bigger. It's going to hold a lot more paint. So I'm going to dip it in the can, bang and load. Excellent, that holds a lot more paint. Now I can probably cut all the way from the top down in one stroke. So I'm still going to wipe all that paint off my brush. Go into my cut line very carefully. Now the tougher part is, now it's a little more tough to control, right? Because it's much more bristles that are going to be touching the edge that you want to make the cut line on. So you've got to be a bit more careful. But as you develop your experience, I really encourage you to try to switch to a larger brush. It's going to allow you to paint things a lot faster. Notice how I'm fanning away all those stroke marks. You don't want to leave goops of paint left behind, or globs of paint. Cut around all the substrates here. Fan that out. You're going to want to get good at cutting with both your hands as well. as time progresses, you'll find yourself up on a ladder and needing to reach over with one hand or another to practice your cutting skills. So you're going to want to get good at cutting with both your hands. Now, of course, I'm better at cutting with my right hand than my left, but if I have to do it, I can reach out and, you know, cut that so very carefully. Of course, we don't need to cut that corner, right? The corners we just fill right in, but that was just an example that if you had to, maybe against here, I'll show you. Notice how I haven't dipped my brush in the can in a while, just holding that much more paint, because a brush like this is just going to hold more than a 2.5, so it's going to be beneficial. Now I'm going to switch to what my favorite brush is, a 3.5 oval cut brush. This thing holds about 3 times the amount of paint as this. And I mean, I could probably paint 1 or 2 of these windows without dipping my brush in the can. So why don't we take a look at what that looks like. So this is a bit of a bigger brush. It's a 3.5 inch Purdy brush. It's an oval cut. It's going to hold a lot more paint. If you see, you can do the bristles there. If you see into the bristles there. Okay, so there we go. And now I can pretty much get a little more on there. No, I mean, I can pretty much paint this whole thing from top to bottom with one stroke of this brush. Get a little bit more on there to make sure I got enough paint for my cut lines. Just cut the entire thing, super smooth. Perfect for interior cut lines as well. Now, there's a bit of dust left on this windowsill from before, so I'm going to blow that away. Okay, great. Get in there. I'll have to clean that up after. But it's tough to control. I got a small edge here that I got to try to paint, and I got to do it very carefully. See, a small edge like this might be easier done with a 2.5 inch brush, but definitely like this brush a lot, so I'm going to keep painting with it. Got to get the corners, of course. Not as easy in the corners, but great for larger areas. Excellent. Okay. Notice how when I fan my paint out, I don't actually use this. I fan it out like that so that more bristles can fan out the edge easier. Seems a bit counterintuitive, but it's the right way to go. Get all those globs out of there. Beautiful. A beautiful first coat. Okay, we're going to let that dry, come back and do a second coat.